Hello again, I am Fluff, and Red Orchestra 2 has a standalone expansion, I believe, called Rising Storm, and it is on the horizon, lol. As a result, PC Gamer, one of their team, went out to Tripwire Interactive and demoed a preview version, as I understand it, and while he was there he interviewed John Gibson, who is the president of Tripwire Interactive, and this was quite an interesting interview. Now, one of the subjects that came up was to do with making Red Orchestra 2 more accessible for players, particularly from arcade games like Call of Duty, and that was what they ran with the headline, was a quote from John Gibson saying, or criticising how COD has almost ruined a generation of shooter players. Now, the story runs that trying to make Red Orchestra 2 more accessible, John Gibson went and got some people he knew that were very good or heavily into Call of Duty, and got them to test and give feedback on this action mode, the easier mode, more accessible game mode for newer players or players from other titles to get into the Red Orchestra universe or experience. And it's a tale of frustration, really, as the Call of Duty players, unsurprisingly, really took issue with virtually everything that wasn't like Call of Duty. I'm sure that comes as a massive shock to everybody. His thoughts? I just thought, I give up. Call of Duty has ruined this whole generation of gamers. The lament itself runs along the lines of too much compression of skill gaps and shallow gameplay. Incidentally, someone did make a good point which sort of crystallises what's really going on, and that's the idea of slot machine shooters versus skill-based shooters, or more skill-based shooters. The point being that there is perhaps not a completely clean division, but you'll get people who are hardcore into the slot machine style where you don't have to be the best, you can still do well, and then you've got more skill-based where you're going to probably start off getting your ass kicked and slowly but surely improve. And you'll also have people who dabble a little in both, and people who go from one to the other. The thing being here really that you can't really make a game that caters to both sides, or at least certainly not with a great deal of ease and success instantly, and more to the point, it's unlikely that you'll be able to poach an audience like that. Now I got to thinking, and a few things occurred to me. The first being the sheer difference in the type of experience we're on about here between these arcadey stuff like Call of Duty and the more, call it skill-based if you like, Red Orchestra 2. I never got to playing Red Orchestra, the first one, but I do have a few friends who spent quite a lot of time in it from what I've been told, and it was universally reported to have been a bit of an arse and quite hard to play. And so you're looking at Call of Duty, it's very quick entertainment, it does what it does very well, quick and easy with instant rewards, it's fun. And then you've got Red Orchestra 2, slow, methodical, very wide skill gap, and it forces you to try and improve as a player to get competitive. You can't just cruise along at whatever skill level you jump in with. So there's no point trying to be accessible because A, you're not going to compete with an established franchise that does what it does better. You can't poach players based on that, and Call of Duty has quite an established lineage at this point that, while not the bastion of ultimate innovation, has got to the point where it's polished and people can guarantee that they know what they're going to get, and that it's also going to work, more to the point, once they install it, especially on PC. Also, B, if a player comes across from Call of Duty, chances are they're looking for a more nuanced experience, they're looking for something more skill-based, and if a person is in that mindset, they'll actually be willing to endure the pain of being on the low end of the skill curve, so you shouldn't have to cater to them at all. They'll be motivated, self-motivated to improve. You don't need to lower the bar just so that they feel that they can achieve. In actual fact, that's probably just going to put them off, because to a certain kind of mind I imagine it feels quite condescending. The irony here is that having made the game accessible for those guys, and again they'd probably not be looking for that, or they'd still be playing Call of Duty, all it does is leave them thinking it's a crap Call of Duty clone, and it simultaneously pisses off many of the core player base from the original Red Orchestra the guys who are going to be sticking with the series of the brand guaranteed purchases, if you like. Red Orchestra 2 had launch problems. It had an accessible mode, yes, but it was one the more COD type players never liked, and the core crowd absolutely hated the guys from Red Orchestra for the most part. So in one fell swoop they'd managed to not appeal to the arcade slot machine guys, and they'd also managed to alienate a bunch of the core player base, which is a very, very bad move. Call of Duty, they worked out what the players wanted and they stick to it. They play a fugue with variations on a theme, it's variations within a set framework, and they know that it's the one that their players like. They deliver an acceptably polished product, and their audience, particularly on PC, knows it's going to work. Okay, so it makes the trade-off that you don't see great tech advances each time, but that's something people are willing to deal with to get a decent guaranteed gaming experience for their money. So in short, the people behind Call of Duty are quite smart. They wouldn't have got this far if they hadn't been. It's also true that in the medium of entertainment, you'll get more success in terms of sheer numbers for easier, faster rewarding, shorter playtime titles than the slower paced, more thorough, higher skill ceiling, or if you like, less random, and larger overall player skill range titles. That was a very bad sentence. Now there are far more people who quite like a 5 to 15 minute rainbow candy floss explosion of kills, streaks, and easier to get into gameplay experiences that are full of hell yeah and hoo-ah, than the people wanting a high tension, high risk and reward, punishing and demanding one. Taking RO2 as an example, it might actually last an hour or more for one round. Plus you're also asking payment upfront for a boxed product, and for your RO guys, the guys that are coming from Red Orchestra, no problem, no issue. They want a new Red Orchestra, the Call of Duty crowd. Well, you've got to persuade them to spend money on an unknown. If it's a choice between Red Orchestra 2, that they don't know, and Call of Duty X, that they do know, what do you think they're going to do? So my personal take on Red Orchestra 2 is that it's fun. It really is fun, and now that it works consistently, I'm enjoying it a lot. It's hard, yes, but that's part of the fun. On launch, it was buggy as hell. I admit I didn't actually pick it up at launch because I had a suspicion it would be, and the people that I knew that did buy it were all reporting the exact same problems, horrible technical issues, ridiculous amounts of issues. When I picked it up, on the winter sale I think, or possibly on a weekend sale, for about £7, it was still as buggy as hell, DCing all over the place, crashing to desktop. It still freezes intermittently while you're playing, with a momentary sound loop that's never been fixed. You know, I mean, come on. And I don't think it could decide basically what it wanted to be. I know what the core following wanted it to be, and I think I know what the dev team were after, but I don't think the game reflects that in the slightest. It's starting to now, but it's far too late in the day. You know, what use is it having a fantastic multiplayer experience if there's not many people around to experience it? I mean, there is still people around, but even so. The fact that they had to issue an apology in one of their videos is sort of, as far as I'm concerned, quite telling, really. I think they've probably damaged the brand irreparably for many of the original Red Orchestra fans. Some, of course, will be far more loyal, for better or worse. And while I'm thinking about it, incidentally, this whole high art, low art superiority complex thing, especially with these kinds of games, it is old. More to the point, and it's not without a certain amount of amusement, I note that there are plenty of gamers who use the simplest method of picking games, i.e., what do I find fun? And hence there's quite a few who will, and I guarantee are, playing currently both the shooter-playing ruining demons of the genre, and the better, in quotes, titles like Red Orchestra 2, or the more hardcore skill-based stuff.
Hurry up.
So, it's not a good idea, if your previous title was known for being pretty hardcore, to then bastardise it on the off chance you're going to get a share of a market that's already pretty bloody nailed down, has had plenty of sequels by the time you're planning to release as well, and that people are very familiar and comfortable with. Because why? Because change. They don't want to change. If I know that I'm going to get the same good experience with acceptable amounts of change, managed change, then I know I'm not wasting my money, and that is probably the biggest thing here, really. But at its simplest, avoiding catering totally and utterly to your core followers when you occupy a relatively small niche anyway, is not a good idea. Surprise, surprise, it's because quite a few of them will get knocked when you don't, and head for greener pastures, and it results in the kind of situation we've seen here, where scraping 3,000 players online at once is the best RO2 tends to manage. It's not dead, it's not on life support, it's just not doing well at all. Of course Rising Storm might inject some more life, and although I think it deserves it, I also think the price needs to be kept reasonably low and realistic, really. It's not going to be, you know, the biggest, most played game ever, but the guys that do play it are very loyal, they're very cool for the most part, friendly to one another and newcomers. It would be a shame to see that kind of community go down the drain. And as for Call of Duty and its ilk almost ruining a generation of shooter players, thing is, saying that is, or making any kind of judgment on that is subjective as hell, and I know you'll get plenty of different answers depending on where you go. Moral of the story? Rather than trying to steal your neighbour's territory, if you've already got a decent one yourself, maybe you should focus on making the niche better. Making it a more attractive place that people will want to come to, and even maybe if the entry requirement is a little bit high, one that they're going to be willing to pay because they actually feel that the experience is going to be worth that investment that they put in. That is how you do it. Just pandering to people who will not be satisfied unless you create a carbon copy of something else which they then won't buy because it is a carbon copy is not the way to do it. But of course, that is just my opinion, and I have comparatively little knowledge of how these things work. I tend to hope that common sense will be enough. That's all you're going to hear from me for now though, so thank you for watching, and take care.